What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, February 4th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. And we have a 7-game NBA slate tonight. Still a decent amount of injury news that we are waiting on. Also, obviously, the chance of guys getting traded between now and lock as well. But going to walk through game by game, looking at my current player exposures. Obviously, those are going to change a lot, most likely in a lot of cases between now and lock. But take a look at how the slate looks to me right now. And more importantly, just talk about pricing, matchups, all of that. We can take a look at early ownership, which again is pretty likely to change between now and lock also. But going to go through game by game. If you are trying to find a specific game, you can always figure it out by which game is highlighted up here at the top in the banner up here. But yeah, going to do the show as usual. If you have questions, throw them in chat. Happy to answer those. As a reminder, I'll mention it at the top, but if you hadn't already heard, those of us at Endgame Syndicate, Utical, Brick75, Nerdy Tenor, and myself, we acquired Run the Sims, and for the Super Bowl, we are unlocking the Showdown Sims tool, making that free. So if you are planning on playing Super Bowl Sunday, check that out at runthesims.com. You can customize projections, run Sims, do all the stuff that you would want to do with a Sims tool. Really good product over there that they already had. So we have that, and we're going to be looking to build some more stuff over there, improve the existing NFL product, all of that. So check out the Showdown Sim for free on Super Bowl Sunday. Also, use the promo code ENDGAME, sign up for any of the NFL packages, and you will get 10% off and be locked into that price for life. So check that out in addition to using the Showdown tool, which again is free on Sunday for the Super Bowl. So starting here with the Mavs and the Sixers, this is the game with arguably the most injury news on the slate. It's not really on the Dallas side. The Dallas side is more so we don't actually know what the lineup is going to look like, but Dallas is, for the most part, a lot healthier today, has more players active, certainly, than they did in their game against Cleveland the other day. Quentin Grimes was traded, if you missed that today, so he will not be playing. PJ Washington is out. Anthony Davis is out. No Derek Lively, no Dwight Powell. Max Christie is available. I don't know if he's going to start or not. I projected him to start, gave him like 28, 29, 30 minutes, somewhere in there. But I think that basically we expect Kyrie to start. You expect Gafford to start. You expect Clay to start. And then it's anybody's guess. So I'm really surprised just looking at this for the first time that I'm getting to Dante Exum. I think this will go away. But I was going to say that the candidates for the other spots are basically Dante Exum, Najee Marshall, Christie, Prosper could start. Like, they could do a lot of different stuff. But the spot that I do like the most and the field likes the most here is Daniel Gafford. Right now projected for 27% ownership. I'm in that same range. He's 7,200, which obviously is expensive. There is potentially some elevated foul risk here as well if Joel Embiid ends up playing. He is questionable for the Sixers, but there's really no backup to Daniel Gafford right now. Maxi Kleber is not on the team anymore. Dwight Powell is out. Derek Lively is out, and PJ Washington is out. So I've mentioned it a lot on shows. I think that one spot that tends to kind of get overlooked still in the industry projection wise is that a lot of times starting centers play more if they don't have their normal backup. I don't want to go too crazy on Daniel Gafford minutes here because, again, there is foul risk in any game, not just because of the matchup. There's obviously blowout risk in any game. Random shit happens in games, but there's no backup here really for Daniel Gafford. So 32 minutes is where I went on the projection. I think that's pretty standard industry wide from what I've seen. You could make the case if you really wanted to be aggressive and go higher. I think, like, in a perfect world where there is no foul trouble, there is no blowout, and he's playing well, like, conceivably, I think you could see mid 30s from Gafford here. And he has been a very good fantasy producer, but one way or the other, I am still getting to him even at the relatively expensive $7,200 price tag. Dante Exum here, I assume, just goes away by lock. I don't really know what to make of this. Like, you can see on the screen, I projected him for 20.5 minutes. That is higher than I think I've seen other places project him. He played 21 minutes in his start against Cleveland. I kind of just assume that, like, he's somebody that is going to be in their rotation. He physically played 21 minutes last game. I just assume he plays similar minutes today. That still didn't give him a great projection. Like, I have him at 17.5 DraftKings points. So I assume that as guys get ruled out, this goes away. But at the same time, with the information we have available right now, he's 3,500. He has small forward eligibility. There are plenty of pay up guys on this slate that I do want to get to that he opens up at no ownership. So like, I understand why he's showing up, but at the same time, I would be pretty surprised if this actually holds for me. Kyrie, at 8,600, pretty good price tag for him. Obviously playing without Luka, he's playing huge minutes in games without Luka. You have a relatively close spread here. I think he's a solid enough play. There are a couple of other guards that I, at least in my head, like more. I haven't looked yet to see if I'm actually getting them more, but I guess I won't hide it. But like, I like both of the I like the Cleveland backcourt a lot here. Whether or not I'm getting to them, I don't know yet. But matchup wise, I really like them. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm getting to them a lot. So maybe that's why I don't have more Kyrie. But I certainly think he looks fine. 8,600, given his upside, is a more than fair salary. Clay at 5,300 is somewhat interesting just because we've seen reduced playing time lately in some games, but it's been either by design, like you had the game a few games ago where they said coming in that he was going to be limited to, I think it was 24 minutes. Then you had the game against the Cavs last game where obviously he didn't play a lot because they were losing by 100 points. If this game is competitive, like there are plenty of minutes there. We've seen games recently where he tops 30. So I went 27. I think the playing time range here is pretty wide on Clay, but he's cheap and obviously capable of getting hot from three. Najee Marshall getting some ownership here at 4,600. If he starts, I would certainly like him more. I projected 25 minutes for him off the bench. If he starts, I think that gets up to like 28, 29. So I didn't get as much as the field right now, but I think he's perfectly fine. If this Dante Exum thing goes away, maybe that turns into a little bit more Marshall as well. Max Christie, 4,800. I didn't get there. Nothing else from the Mavs is getting ownership. On the Philly side, this is all just a huge question mark. Right now, I have all the Q tags projected in, but Joel Embiid is questionable. KJ Martin is questionable. Eric Gordon is questionable. Kyle Lowry is questionable. And Andre Drummond is questionable. Basically, if all these guys are in, it becomes difficult to want much from the Sixers because salaries have adjusted to Joel Embiid being out. John C said no Kyler Kelly. Daniel Gafford's back. I don't have any reason to play Kelly unless he's like starting next to him. I assume Kelly is just backing up Gafford basically. Like I think that's who the actual backup center is. I was saying he doesn't have a backup center, but I think it's Kyler Kelly. But the last game for Kelly was with Gafford being out. So for the Sixers here, like if the questionable guys are in, you're just getting basically the way I think about it is Embiid matters for everybody else from a rates standpoint. Like if Embiid is in, Tyrese Maxey's rates go down, his fantasy production goes down, everybody else's fantasy production goes down. And then the other questionable players, they don't really have impacts on their teammates outside of how many minutes are those teammates going to play. Like if all these Q tag guys end up getting ruled out, then Kelly Oubre is probably playing 40 minutes again. But if they're in, you're probably looking at, 35, 36, somewhere in there. So with the Q tag guys projected in, I don't think there's anything particularly interesting from the Sixers other than, by all means, still take some shots on Tyrese Maxey if you want to. And Embiid's still at 9,600. I think that's a very difficult sell at this point. So it's pretty much Maxey or bust, I think, if the Q tag guys are in. If they're out, then obviously things start to look better for different players depending on who is in, who is out. Obviously really, really difficult at this point to break down, but this is a 7:00 game. So we will get that news. Agbaji or Exum. So I'm going to answer this just based off of what I personally think. I have no idea if I have more Agbaji than Exum. I was really surprised to see how much Exum I had. I would rather have Agbaji than Exum. That's ownership agnostic. That's nothing to do with Sims. I just, assuming Exum's coming off the bench and Agbaji is starting, I would rather have Agbaji. But I don't know if that's going to be reflected or not in what I'm going to show you. Houston taking on Brooklyn. No Fred VanVleet, no Tari Eason. Alperen Şengün is back. So I'm expecting right now, and obviously, it could change. They could start any number of guys. My expectation for the starting lineup is the same as yesterday, except with Şengün in place of Eason. So that would be Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Jayshawn Tate, and Şengün. And I'm getting to this team. There's only one guy getting a lot of ownership, and that's Cam Whitmore getting 35% right now. I'm getting the 14%. And again, I think this is just something very similar to what I was talking about with Exum. Like, there's going to be other stuff that opens up most likely. But if you tell me that Cam Whitmore coming off the bench, probably playing 23 minutes or so, is going to be 35% owned. And Dante Exum at basically the same price, playing, let's call it 20 minutes, is going to be 1%, then yeah, that's why I'm getting to Dante Exum. But as we get closer to lock, I assume that everything kind of balances out one way or another. But Cam Whitmore does make sense. He projects as a good value. You can see here I have him projected several points higher than Dante Exum at only 3,600. Van Vliet being out opens up minutes for him. Jabari Smith, of course, opens up minutes for him as well. He's played 23 minutes in the games without Van Vliet this year, and I expect similar playing time here. So I do think Whitmore is a good value. It's just that right now the ownership is coming in so high that I'm not getting him in the set of lineups that I ran, but it's 5 o'clock and certainly could change. Amen Thompson getting 6% ownership right now. Dylan Brooks getting 6%. I think they're both fine. Obviously, a lot of playing time available for them. It is a back-to-back, but Houston generally runs pretty tight rotations. They are missing a couple of main pieces. Thompson only played 37 minutes yesterday, which, for him is on the low end of his playing time range. Also, really good player. Point guard, small forward eligible is nice. The only thing holding you back is that he is up to $8,500, which, of course, is a pretty expensive salary, but you also have increased usage and assist opportunities without Fred VanVleet. So I think Thompson as a contrarian play looks pretty good. I think Dylan Brooks could see some more playing time here at 4,600. He is power forward only, which kind of sucks, but at low ownership, I think he's a relatively inexpensive way that you can get contrarian without sacrificing upside. Şengün is purely a contrarian tournament play. He's too expensive for his median projection on a slate where you have a lot of good center options. But that being said, you do have Şengün here. And one thing that I do like about him from an upside standpoint is he is somebody that can pick up some of the assist opportunities that are vacated by Fred VanVleet. I expect Thompson to get some of that. I expect Jalen Green to get some of that. But Şengün is a competent facilitator, playmaker. So you could, just see that triple-double game out of Şengün. It is in there, even though it's obviously not super likely to happen. So I kind of view him as somebody where I don't think his median projection is that great for his $8,900 salary, but his good games have the potential of being good enough that you really don't care if he was 8,900, 9,200, 9,600, 8,500. It's just he scored 55 points, he triple-doubled, and he's 3% owned. So that's pretty much the case for Şengün, but he is overpriced, I think. Jalen Green, 7,400, should play a lot here. I went 34 minutes on the back-to-back. I didn't want to get too aggressive, but he's averaging about 36 minutes per game in the couple of games without VanVleet. Played 36 last night. Plenty of upside for him. And then Jae'Sean Tate at 3,100. If he starts, I assume that once again, it's just a spot start like last night. It doesn't have to be. I projected him for 21 minutes, which is what he played yesterday. But without Eason, depending on how Houston wants to run their rotation, they could just give Tate 26, 27 minutes and then not play Jeff Green much. I projected Jeff Green to basically just be his backup and to play, 13, 14 minutes. So at 21 minutes, I'm not getting much Tate. If I were to bump that a little bit, maybe I get a little bit more. But basically, I think he's just a mediocre point per dollar value guy that I would like if I was more confident that he was going to play more minutes. John said, does this go till lock? No, this just goes till I get through the games. I then have to go make my lineups. Refused to do shows up until lock when I was getting paid a lot to do them. I definitely am not doing them when I'm not. But no, I'm just going to get through every game. It'll probably run till 5:30, 5:35, something like that. But if you do want basically my takes on everything up till lock, my projections are available using the links in the description below. You'll get access to a sheet that just updates as I update my own projections. You can get that either by just signing up for Endgame Syndicate, and in addition to all the content we have there, you just get access to my projections, or using the Dub Club link, 3-day trial on that. But that'll just give you a link to the projection sheet that updates again as I update it. So that's how you can get my thoughts on stuff going up to a lock. But moving over to the Brooklyn side, 102 team total here. Brutal spot for Brooklyn. John said I would take the under on this game. Yeah, it seems like that. I'm not recommending taking the under because I don't have any data to back that up, but it does feel like a game that just has the potential to be absolute dog shit here. But 102 total for Brooklyn. No Ben Simmons, no bunch of other guys that have been out for a while for Brooklyn. D'Angelo Russell getting 7% ownership. He's the guy I'm getting to the most at 6,400. Russell showing up 11% for me. The playing time is the only concern. Brooklyn's just not playing him as many minutes as they could if they wanted to. I'm expecting, 25 to 27 minutes, somewhere in there on average, but he does kind of just have carte blanche to do whatever he wants when he's on the floor with this team. And he's never been a bad fantasy producer when he's in that type of environment. The questions with D'Angelo Russell are always about, who are his teammates? How much are they going to let him get away with? What's the system doing? He can go produce. So I do like the upside he gives you at 6,400. Keon Johnson at 5K should give you around 30 minutes. He's getting 14% ownership. I'm a little lower than that right now. Not a great point per minute guy, but certainly a solid, right around 5X projection here. Zaire Williams is getting a ton of ownership, 28%. He's 4,600, shooting guard, small forward. I understand, he looks fine. I have him projected 5.5, 6X, somewhere around there. He's just not the type of guy either that in large field tournaments I'm super concerned about not having. He played 36 minutes last game. Playing time has been up a little bit, but in general, Brooklyn hasn't played him a ton of minutes when he starts. Usually he plays less than Jalen Wilson plays. I have him at 29 minutes here. I think that kind of covers the full range of outcomes for him. He could play a few minutes more, but he also is live to play a few minutes less. It's not like Brooklyn's actually super short on bodies. It's mostly how deep of a rotation do they want to run. And so I think he's fine. I think he projects relatively well. You can see over here, I have him with, actually, that's not what that's showing. So ignore what I was about to say. But it's just if a third of the field or a quarter of the field is going to play him, I think I can just find alternatives is pretty much, I think, what that is here. But point per dollar wise, he looks fine. Claxton, 5,700 is pretty cheap, but I just have a lot of other centers I like on this slate. Day'Ron Sharpe, I assume, is going to play most, if not all, of the backup center minutes without Simmons. So I still have trouble getting to Sharpe here just because there are so many centers I like. But I do think it's kind of a sneaky spot because we'd seen in the games recently when Simmons has played that Sharpe and Claxton are basically combining for 45 minutes. And then you're getting either Watford or Simmons, whatever you want to call it, playing 3 minutes. I wouldn't be surprised here if Day'Ron Sharpe's minutes actually equal 48 minus whatever Claxton plays. And he's a really good point per minute guy. So that's the case for Sharpe. But all that being said, the opportunity cost is still really high. And you can't really... it's tough to prioritize him or get to much of him at all. Emwald said, do we have the option to see your minutes/rates and alter those if we want, or is it simply projections? Minutes are in there. So you can backdoor adjust it if you want. It does show you how many minutes I haven't projected for. You can figure out from that, obviously, fantasy points per minute and make adjustments. That's how, in the past, when I use other people's projections, I would always do it, is I would pay attention to their minutes, and then adjust based on their fantasy points per minute. So, you have access to the minutes, so you can see what I'm projecting. You can also see who I'm projecting to start, and also whether or not I've updated for recent injury news. Am I getting to Beekman? No, I haven't projected to play 12 minutes. So, as far as the Zaire Williams, the rotational stuff here, Zaire Williams plays more if Tyrese Martin plays less, or if Beekman's just not in the rotation. But with the way that Brooklyn has handled their rotation pretty much all season long, I just assume they're going to play close to as many guys as they can. I don't view Ben Simmons being out as Brooklyn is likely to take Ben Simmons minutes and then redistribute them aggressively to the guys that were already playing. Brooklyn has a tendency to just add a new guy, in this case, probably Tyrese Martin, to the rotation. And so that's kind of just me guessing what they're going to do based on coaching tendencies that we've seen this year. Whereas you have teams like Houston and the Knicks that if somebody is out, the starters are just playing more. With Brooklyn, it's usually just next guy up steps in and plays 18, 20 minutes, something like that. Boston taking on Cleveland in what should hopefully be a very good game. Clearly the most appealing game from an NBA standpoint on this slate. And I think it's a really appealing game too, even though both of these teams are good defensively. There's a couple of things that I really like here. And not surprised that I'm getting a lot of the Cleveland side also. First off, if you look at play type data, there's actually a few guys here that really stand out. Jason Tatum grades out really well in my play type model based on, what he does and then what Cleveland allows opponents to do and how efficient they are at stopping it. And then on the other side of it, kind of getting ahead of myself, but Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland both do as well. So even though as a team, these teams are good defensively, you still have a high total in this game. You have individual stars on both of these teams that actually are good at exploiting things that that their opponent will allow them to do. And then the other thing that applies to both of these teams is, and I've talked about this a lot, especially in the context of the Wizards. So basically on the other side of this, salaries are to some extent influenced by your average playing time, because your average playing time impacts your average fantasy production, and that is a driving factor in how salaries are created. The Celtics and the Cavs do not play many games at all that have a 1-point spread. Any game is capable of blowing out, but obviously it's less likely to blow out than your other games. So it's not even so much about, well, they could play this like a playoff game and Cleveland could really cut down their rotation and play their guys 38 minutes. Like, that could happen. It's not what I'm projecting, but it's more so just about, if every game that Cleveland played this year, or every game that Boston played this year, had a 1-point spread, Jason Tatum would average, 37, 38 minutes per game instead of 35 or whatever he averages. All these guys would just average an extra minute or two. And so they naturally end up being a little bit underpriced. Another way to think of it is basically, if every game that Boston or Cleveland played was a 1-point spread, Kristaps Porzingis wouldn't be 7,100. Tatum wouldn't be 9,800. Drew wouldn't be 4,600. White wouldn't be 6,100. Like, just across the board, you just add, several $100s to pretty much all of these salaries. So I'm not surprised that I am getting here. Kristaps Porzingis 7,100 looks pretty good to me. Likely to play north of 30 minutes here. 16% projected ownership. I'm a little north of that. I'm right around the field on Tatum, 19% projected ownership. I'm at 20%. And then getting a little above the field on Drew, who I think probably plays 30, 31 minutes. Right around the field on White. I'm not getting to Jaylen Brown, which I don't love. For whatever reason, I don't get to Jaylen Brown all that often. And usually what happens is I play Tatum and Brown goes off. And then occasionally I do get to Brown and Tatum goes off. It's kind of been like that all season long. But I'm not getting to Brown here, so do with that what you will. I think he's a perfectly fine play. He's just not showing up in the lineups that I built right now. But Porzingis, Tatum, Holiday all look good to me. I think for me, the rest of these guys are secondary plays. Power posted in chat that Eric Gordon is out and Drummond is out. So we still need Embiid. And we still need, unless, we got that too. So Drummond out, Gordon out, Lowry out. KJ Martin matters, because if he's also out, then you have a ton of wing minutes available. Embiid obviously matters a ton. If Embiid is out, then, so let me pull the pricing back up here for Philly. So Yabusele's 6K. If Embiid's out, Yabusele's probably playing north of 30 minutes again, and is basically like a secondary power forward option. Would look perfectly fine. If Embiid is in, it obviously limits that. Embiid is in. Thank you for that. So basically, I think Philly looks better now than they did when I talked about them, but they don't look as good as they could have, obviously, because of Embiid being in. So, like, Embiid being in still makes it tough to, be that excited about getting to, like, Yabusele. It still makes Maxey have to deal with Embiid's usage. Kelly Oubre, from the news we got, is probably in some ways the biggest beneficiary. Like, he played 44 minutes last game. That was the game without Eric Gordon. They were without several guys. If KJ Martin is back, like, he can soak up some of those minutes, but he's been out for a while too. So I think the biggest beneficiaries from the news that we just got are like your Ricky Council, Justin Edwards, Kelly Oubre guys, your wings, because that's really what you're missing now. Like, Tyrese Maxey is going to soak up all the minutes at point guard like he always does. Embiid is taking those center minutes and taking a lot of usage. But your guys like Kelly Oubre, Ricky Council, Justin Edwards, they're not high usage guys. They are guys that are just going to soak up wing minutes. So I would expect that that's what I start getting to now. And, keep in mind, I'm kind of just going on the fly with this, but they should be really shorthanded at the wing. Like, they don't have Caleb Martin. They traded him. They may or may not have KJ Martin. Council's 4,300. Edwards is 4,200. No Gordon, no Lowry. Oubre should play a lot. I assume the starting lineup is going to be Maxey. So this is where it gets tricky. Maxey, Oubre, Edwards, one of Council or Yabusele, and then Embiid. So, like, I think Council plays decent minutes one way or the other, but if he starts, then you would expect more. So I think it's a bump for those wings. Steve said, how many minutes are you giving Embiid? I had like 25 or 26 when I ran this. I hadn't spent a whole lot of time on Philly yet, though, just because I knew I was going to end up redoing it in one way or another anyway. So I assume I'm going to end up somewhere in that like mid to upper 20s range, unless we get some sort of clarification that he's playing way more than that. I don't really know that I have a way to get to enough minutes that I would get to Embiid at 9,600 one way or the other. Getting back to the Boston-Cleveland game, talked about Boston. On the Cleveland side, absolutely love the lack of ownership coming into this team. Hope it stays that way. These were the guards that I was referring to when I said why I probably wasn't getting too much Kyrie in the lineups that I built. Donovan Mitchell, 9% projected ownership, 8,600, so that same price tag as Kyrie. I think this is a good spot. Boston has actually, as a team this year, I think I got off the page, so this is going to suck. Oh, no, it's still in front of me. So as a team this year, Boston allowing the 5th most possessions per game to opposing pick and roll ball handlers. They also rank in the 17th percentile in defensive efficiency. Donovan Mitchell ranks in the 82nd percentile in efficiency in the pick and roll this year. He's like a top 10 overall usage guy in the pick and roll. Darius Garland is a pick and roll guard as well. They also, on top of that, like, you don't want, I like that Boston has struggled to defend it and that these guys are very good at it. But that's still not shifting, projections or anything by more than a point or so here or there. But on top of that, you get probably elevated playing time for these guys for the same reasons that I was saying on the Boston side. Cleveland could cut their rotation down, but also it's just more likely to be a competitive game than pretty much any other game that Cleveland plays. So with ownership how it is right now, I am more than happy to be getting to a lot of Donovan Mitchell, getting to a lot of $7,600 Darius Garland. I have no issues getting to a $3,800 Caris LeVert a bit. I projected him for about 24 minutes here. He does have a path to being in the closing lineup. The closing lineup is most likely, assuming a competitive game, going to be Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, and one of Caris LeVert, Max Strus, or somebody even further, somebody else. But it certainly could be LeVert. He's just really cheap, so I don't mind getting to some of him. Evan Mobley, 8K. I'm right around the field. I wouldn't mind getting more. Like, on the one hand, Evan Mobley could just play a ton of minutes here. He played 35 the last time these two teams met. There is obviously no shortage of guys for him to defend on Boston. If this were like a playoff game, Evan Mobley's playing, 40 plus minutes in this spot. But my concern is just that he hasn't played a ton since coming back from his injury. Part of that's been, because of blowouts, garbage time, whatever, but I wasn't comfortable just projecting him for quite as many minutes as, say, Donovan Mitchell, but I still have a little over 32 minutes on him. Makes him look fine. If you kind of disagree with me and want to go a little bit heavier, I wouldn't push back too hard on that. Jared Allen, 6,400, same kind of thing. Projects for more minutes than usual, but you do have that loaded center position. So for me, the two priorities here are the two in the backcourt, Mitchell and Garland. Josh said, would you play them together? Yeah, I have no issue with that. The argument that people always have for playing two guys like Mitchell and Garland together is that, obviously only one person can score. But for one, you expect staggered minutes from these guys. So they are each going to be on the floor without the other one for a pretty decent chunk of their playing time. But there is also positive correlation that sometimes gets overlooked, where if this game is competitive, they are both likely to play more minutes. If this game somehow goes, if this game were a good overtime, then they obviously are both playing more minutes. If this game is just higher scoring than usual, they are both likely to be more productive than they're being projected for. So there's a lot more, I think, and also neither one's expensive. That whole calculus changes if like Donovan Mitchell's 10K and Darius Garland's 9K, because then you need, the 60-point game from Mitchell and the 50-point game from Garland. Whereas right now, if you just go get like 50 from Mitchell, 45 from Garland, you're looking pretty good. And that's just completely reasonable based on their projections. So no issues whatsoever playing them together. I actually wouldn't be surprised if I'm getting them together a lot. 14% of my Mitchell lineups have Garland. So yeah, no problem with that at all. Really like the Cavs backcourt here. Embiid, or Nurse said Embiid's likely to play around 30 minutes. I still am going to have trouble with that. 30 minutes, I think, is kind of like the mark where you could convince yourself to play a low on Embiid if you want to. I doubt that I do much, if at all, just because he is still expensive, and I want Porzingis, I want Gafford. We haven't gotten there yet, but I want Towns. you have Pirtle on the slate, you have Vooch on the slate. Vooch also possibly not having Jalen Smith is a situation where, the Sixers game starts at 7, so you have to make your Embiid decision then. As far as late news goes at the center position, if Jalen Smith is out, Vooch's projection goes up because he probably plays more minutes. You also have Miles Turner questionable. If he's out, Thomas Bryant becomes a really good value play. So you have, in addition to the opportunity cost that comes with Embiid at the position and his actual cost, you also have like the time cost, the late swap cost, whatever you want to call it, another version of opportunity cost, basically. So, I think 30 minutes is like, you can convince yourself to play him if you really want to, but I would assume that I'm not. Paul said on FanDuel is 8,400. Okay, different conversation there. If he's playing 30 minutes at 8,400, I haven't run FanDuel lineups, but he's obviously going to look much better at 9,600 on DraftKings. Mr. Humble Crypto said Yabu is starting. So I assume that means the starting lineup ends up being Maxey, Oubre, Edwards, Yabu, and Embiid. And then Yabu maybe backs up Embiid, or maybe they just keep Bona in there as the backup. Yabu becomes borderline interesting too as a starter because it is possible that he plays like low to mid 30s, get some backup center minutes. With them being so shorthanded at the wings, though, I assume that Bona is still going to play like 12. Maybe you get something like 30 minutes for Embiid, 12 for Bona, 6 at center for Yabu, and then he plays like 26 at the 4. Council backs him up. Something like that is probably how I will end up projecting that. Moving on to the Knicks and the Raptors. Knicks on a back-to-back. Knicks also on a 3-4. Knicks have a coach that I'm not sure gives a shit about any of that. Probably doesn't. Really hasn't for most of the season. You can go back and look at previous 3-4s, previous back-to-backs, and nothing really changes. As far as rotations go, OG Anunoby is out. So I talked about this on the show yesterday. I ended up getting screwed because I caught the McBride starting news and then missed the update. And I actually thought that the industry as a whole was way under projecting Miles McBride's minutes as a starter. So I was getting him like everywhere, saw the updated lineup a couple minutes before lock, was only able to get him out of like half my lineups. And then Achua goes and plays like all of those minutes. But the point I'm making here is that we saw the rotation that I talked about yesterday that you should expect to see when guys are out for the Knicks. The exact opposite of what I was saying with Brooklyn. The Knicks just play their guys that are already in the rotation even more. Karl Anthony Towns played 38 minutes in a game where he was in foul trouble in the first quarter and lost like 4 minutes. The last time that Josh Hart was out, Karl Anthony Towns played like 42 minutes or something. I have him at 38 minutes here. It's an aggressive projection, but at the same time, I think it's the right one. Like he's live to play 40 plus if everything goes perfectly. This game only has a 5.5 point spread. I think being in like the 37, 38 minute range makes sense. I'm at 40 minutes for Josh Hart. I'm at 39 for Bridges. I'm getting to all of these guys, and the field isn't getting to all of them all that much. And it's really just a spot where I'm fine being aggressive here because that's how Tibbs runs his rotation. If you look at the way other places in the industry are projecting the Knicks, they're kind of copping out. Not that it's wrong. Like it's a completely reasonable way to project them, but you'll see like a handful of minutes to Jericho Sims, a handful of minutes to Okporty, Shamet projected to play 2 rotations. And it's like, maybe all those things happen, but realistically, based on all the information we have and how we know Tibbs handles these situations, I think it's a lot more likely that they run basically the same rotation they did yesterday, where Shamet continues to play 1 rotation. Okporty plays like 6 minutes or something like that. And other than that, whoever starts between Achua and McBride plays mid-30s. Whichever of them comes off the bench plays mid-20s. And the usual starters play huge minutes. So that's how I projected it. If that ends up being wrong, fine. But the nice thing, too, is that even if it's wrong, it's probably wrong by like a couple of minutes. Like if it's wrong, it probably is that like Shamet plays, 14 minutes instead of 8. So like Hart plays 38 and Bridges plays 36 and Towns plays 36. Even if that ends up being the case, they're still playing the Raptors. They're still capable of just smashing in 2 less minutes than I projected. So I'm very happy to be getting to the Knicks here. 117 team total looks nice. Matchup against Toronto looks great. Karl Anthony Towns getting 23% ownership. I'm at 36% right now at 9,400. Josh Hart, I'm basically 2x the field at 7,700. I'm 4x the field on Bridges at 6,300, shooting guard, small forward. Getting to Achua at 5,700. getting to McBride, who sucks, but is only 3,700, and then getting to Brunson, who I would actually like more of, but at 8,400, probably losing some of him to like the Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland stuff. But I think I could probably make a case for getting a little bit more Brunson here. The reason that I'm lower on Brunson's minutes than Towns, Hart, Bridges is that Brunson actually does have a direct backup who is active in campaign. Not that I think Payne is like stealing minutes from Jalen Brunson, but the way I think about it is basically that your point guard spot is just like a string where every minute Brunson plays more, Payne plays less, and vice versa. So it's easier for Tibbs to just play Brunson like 36 and a half minutes. Whereas the 2, 3, 4 for, and really 5 for the Knicks are so interrelated because Achua is typically your backup center. Now he needs to play minutes at the 4 alongside Towns. Anunoby usually plays 38 minutes. Those are all available, and just to be soaked up by a combination of Towns, Achua, McBride, Hart, Bridges. So that's why I have it projected that way. But you could, I think, be a little bit more aggressive on Brunson maybe than I have. But either way, Brunson looks fine. I really like getting to these other pieces, though, for the reasons I was saying. Hopefully some value opens up where McBride stops being a thing. But also, I expect the minutes to be there for both him and for Achua. Moving over to the other side for Toronto, Boucher is... Wow, I had no idea Toronto was 8-2 over their past 10. That's actually crazy. Boucher is questionable. Bruce Brown is questionable. Ignore this Chris Boucher. This is the Dante Exum problem from earlier. It's just a 5 o'clock value thing. I projected him for 15 minutes, 16 fantasy points. Basically, this is just saying if the field is going to play Cam Whitmore 35% of the time and they're going to play Zaire Williams 30% of the time, just play some Chris Boucher and hope to get lucky. But this will probably mostly go away by lock. He's questionable anyway, like I said. Grady Dick looks like a good value option here at 4K. No RJ Barrett. You do have Emmanuel Quickley, who I assume is still very limited. He's played 15 and 17 minutes since coming back from injury. I assume he's not going to just go play 30. Obviously, could be wrong, but Grady Dick looks pretty good here with no Barrett. Should help solidify his minutes. I have him in for about 30. He's getting 28% ownership. I'm right around the field there. Right around the field on Jakob Poeltl at 6,400. Another just good center option here. Should play low 30s in minutes. Agbaji, 3,400, getting 17%. I have 8%. So whoever had asked the question earlier, Dante Exum versus Agbaji. I do have Agbaji projected a couple points higher than Exum. He's not a great point per minute guy. He still has to contend with Scotty Barnes and for whatever minutes he's out there, Emmanuel Quickley for production. But I do assume he's moving into the starting lineup, and he is only 3,400. I think Agbaji is the better projected play. I don't think the range of outcomes is entirely different. Einsteinium said Grady scares me. Yeah, he should. He should scare everybody, but he's also 4K. Kelly Olynyk, 3,300. Obviously, high opportunity cost at the center position. I'm getting to him a little bit in the same way I'm getting to Day'Ron Sharpe. He probably plays all of the non-Jakob Poeltl minutes, or at least close to it. Obviously, he's a high point per minute guy and not getting any ownership, but very, very risky play and probably goes away as other value opens up. And then Scotty Barnes at 9K, point guard, small forward, I do think is interesting. I had trouble getting to him, as you can see, but it is possible he plays an extra minute or two here with RJ Barrett out. And then also when you keep in mind that Emmanuel Quickley is limited, Scotty Barnes is going to have a lot of time where he's on the floor by himself, basically doing everything. And so I do think the ceiling for him is really high at 9K, not getting a ton of ownership. So I like him. I like the play in my head, just not one that I'm really getting to right now. Miami taking on Chicago. Miami at full strength, or full strength minus Jimmy Butler. Khalil Ware, 6,100 center only. Wish he had power forward eligibility, but only getting 16% ownership. He's averaging like 33 minutes per game since he moved into the starting lineup. Played 34 minutes last game. The matchup here is good. I like getting to him still. I'm basically a little over 2x the field there. Duncan Robinson's one of the value pieces that I'm using right now, getting 13% ownership at 4,500, averaging around 29 minutes per game in his starts where Hero has been active and Butler's been out this year. He's not like an exciting guy to play, but neither is Zaire Williams. So I think you can think of it as basically I'm flipping those two right now, where I'm playing Duncan Robinson similarly to how the field is projected to play Zaire Williams. I'm playing Zaire Williams similarly to how the field's projected to play Duncan Robinson. And the reason for that is that I think they're basically the same play. So if ownership ends up evening out between them, my exposures will even out between them. But if you just have the field projected to greatly prefer one, I'll just take the other one because I think they're basically the same. Terry Rozier, 4,600, getting 31%. I have 20%. He's cheap. He's likely to play around 30 minutes here. The matchup's really good. It is Terry Rozier. He is certainly prone to sucking. You also, obviously don't know who he bet on today, but the value looks pretty good there. 3,200 Highsmith, I think it's a semi-interesting just punt play because I am assuming he starts. He's likely to give you around 24 minutes. But if he plays well, like there are more minutes available for him potentially, but mostly it's just the last guy in, hope to get lucky type spot. Jovic at 5K, power forward center, perfectly fine. I'm not getting too much Hero or Bam, which scares the shit out of me. Good spot for both of them, but I really just think it's the ownership and price range. It's not that they're overpriced because they're not. It's that there are so many other options. Like Tyler Hero to me is not drastically better than Donovan Mitchell. I think I have Mitchell projected a point higher or like half a point higher than Hero. So functionally, I think Donovan Mitchell and Tyler Hero are the same play today. And the field's just choosing Tyler Hero at 3 times the rate. So I'm going to play more Mitchell. I think that Adebayo is a good play, especially with power forward eligibility. I have him projected, again, similarly to Mitchell at a little bit lower price tag, but getting 42% ownership. It's just that I can find other guys in that 8K range that have a similar range of outcomes, even if they don't project as well. So I do hope that by lock I have more Hero and Adebayo, but I do think I probably should add like an extra half minute or something on the Hero too. But I also, given the ownership right now, understand why it's shaking out that way, where the field is just really gravitating to this Miami team, which is perfectly fine. It's a good matchup, 116 team total. But I am just kind of gravitating toward this game that has lower ownership, higher total. Going back to what I was saying, where, obviously a matchup against Chicago is more appealing than a matchup against Boston or Cleveland when you're talking just team defense. But I think there's a lot to like from this game that the field seems to disagree with. On the Chicago side, no Dallin Terry. Jalen Smith is questionable. I mentioned it earlier, but the Jalen Smith news does matter. Not only does it open up a couple more minutes, most likely for Buzelis at 4K as a potential value play, but Nikola Vucevic projects for a couple more minutes if Jalen Smith is out. So with Jalen Smith projected in at 8,200, I'm not getting to much Vooch. He's 8% owned. I have 7%. Haven't projected for about 32 and a half, 33 minutes. But if Jalen Smith's out, you're probably getting an extra minute or two onto that Vooch projection, which would certainly make him look quite a bit better. So that's kind of a sneaky spot that if Jalen Smith gets ruled out, you can look to. Josh Giddey, right around the field on him, 6,900. I'm getting to 18%. I'm a little below the field on White and Dosunmu. I think they're fine. Lonzo Ball, 5K. I'm surprised he's only getting 5% ownership, given how at the time that I ran these lineups, kind of value starved the slate was. Lonzo played like 27, 28 minutes last game. The Bulls had come out a couple of games ago and said that he was now capable of playing that. And then he didn't immediately. But then last game, 27.9 minutes. Not having Dallin Terry, I assume they just replaced the Terry minutes with like Javon Carter. But it doesn't hurt that he's out. Horton Tucker also out. So I do like Lonzo here. I'm perfectly happy to be getting 2x the field on him. Lakers taking on the Clippers. My guess at the starting lineup here is Reeves. I'm blanking on what I did. Reeves, LeBron, Rui, Finney-Smith, and Hayes. Obviously, no Anthony Davis, no longer on the team. Luka is not available. They, I think, said maybe Saturday they're hoping for. So they are shorthanded here because they don't have Christie. So basically, it's the same team that they had in their last game, except for Max Christie is now gone as well. So you are taking like 32 minutes or so out of that rotation, which I expect to mostly be distributed to guys that were already in the rotation. I don't expect this to be a spot where they go like super deep into their bench or anything like that. Finney-Smith played 31.8 minutes, including garbage time last game. The reason that I think that's really important is that Finney-Smith's playing time, like they had said recently, Redick had said that they wanted to get Finney-Smith up to starter minutes and that it was basically, they were just limiting him a little bit because he had missed time for what I think was personal reasons. him getting up to him just playing 31.8 minutes. Obviously, he physically can do it, but he also played through garbage time there. And when teams do that with guys that they're trying to ramp up their minutes, a lot of times it's a really good indication that they're just like going to be a full go. They are really prioritizing getting him those minutes. Like if they were concerned at all about the fact that Dorian Finney-Smith was at 29 minutes, you don't play him for the 2 minutes of garbage time or whatever it was. So I think that the playing time for him looks good here, assuming he starts. He's 4K. He's not projected for any ownership. I'm getting to 16%. I have him in for 30 minutes. If he starts, I'm pretty comfortable with that. People are asking about Vanderbilt in chat. I have like a lineup with him. I gave him 16 and a half minutes. I probably need to get to like 18. I'll go back and edit that one. But basically, he's 3,200. My concern there is just, how many minutes can he actually play? How many minutes are they willing to have him actually play? He didn't play a ton last game. Played like 13 and a half, 14 minutes last game. Played the most he's played since returning is 16. So like I'd have a hard time projecting it higher than 18. I already have him projected to play the most minutes he's played all season. So at best, it's just he's 3,200. Hope that he goes out there and blocks like 5 shots in 18 minutes or something. Dalton Connect, I would expect to play a bit more. He's 3,800. I'm not really getting to him. Shooting guard, small forward, but if you want to roll the dice there, I think that's fine. Rui at 5,100, I like quite a bit. He is only 11% owned, which again surprises me given that you have guys not much that less expensive getting a lot of ownership that I don't think are as good. Rui is like the type of guy that I absolutely love going to in spots like this, where there's a lot of uncertainty around exactly what the rotation is going to look like without Max Christie. But think about what Rui does, right? Like he can play the 5. You're missing Anthony Davis, of course. He can be the basically backup center here. It's Vanderbilt, but Rui can play multiple positions. He can play the 3, the 4, the 5. There's just so many ways for him to be out there. And then you look at the rotations they ran last game against the Knicks. Rui played 38 minutes. Was going to play 40 if that game was close. It's a spot where, I went to 34 and a half minutes on him. I think this is basically in line with, if you remember, before Rui got hurt earlier in the year, I don't remember who else was out for the Lakers, but there was just a stretch where Rui was playing like 36 minutes a game. He was playing more minutes than LeBron and Davis regularly. And I think we're kind of in that situation right now with Christie out until, with Christie gone and Davis gone until Luka comes back. So I really, really like getting to Rui here. I like getting to Finney-Smith. LeBron, clearly no problems with that. If I get there, he is expensive at 10.8, but not getting much ownership here. And then, getting a little bit of Connect and Vandy. But I really wanted to highlight that I think more bullish on minutes for Rui and Finney-Smith than the industry in general. So I just see them a little bit differently. Reeves ownership, he's getting none. 8,500. I didn't get to him. I think it's pretty tough to get there. Like that's the same salary range as, Bam and more expensive than Garland. It's the same as Mitchell. It's the same as Irving. It's the same as Brunson. Obviously, Reeves could go play 40 and be great, but I have a hard time getting him at that price. I do like the cheaper pieces here, though, quite a bit that I think are going to play a lot. On the Clipper side, completely clean injury report with the exception of, I think, Cam Christie being out. So nothing that you're going to really be prioritizing here, but I think any of the starters are fine. You don't have any more than 10% ownership coming into anybody. All 5 of the starters are getting at least some ownership, and I'm pretty much around the field on them as well. I don't think there's a lot to say that isn't just super obvious. James Harden is capable of having big games. He's also more expensive than that whole guard range that I just mentioned, which makes it tough to say he's a priority. It's hard to say he should be more popular because then you just have to start giving up on those other guys. Norm Powell at 6,900, shooting guard, small forward, perfectly fine, probably playing mid-30s in minutes. No issues with that. Kawhi, playing more minutes now, generally getting around 28, 7K. Cool. Great spot here for Zubats. John just mentioned it in chat against that front court. The problem is just the position where you have, Porzingis, you have possibly Thomas Bryant as a value play. Karl Anthony Towns is a huge priority for me. Gafford is a big priority, but you absolutely could make the case that Gafford was getting 27, 28% ownership at 7,200. Zubats 10%, so half, less than half the ownership of Gafford at 7,400. Perfectly fine pivot. And I think that I'm probably going to end up a minute or so higher on Zubats when I by lock too. But yeah, I think Zubats is perfectly fine in tournaments. It's obviously a good matchup for him. One thing I had actually forgotten to mention on the Lakers side too, and I'm not getting to him anyway, but there is a path to like Jackson Hayes playing more minutes here too than he has in their last couple of games. I projected, I think 28, which is still more than he's already played, but there is that, potential as well. I still, didn't get to him. Kawhi, obviously playing time has been ramped up recently. 29 is the most minutes we've seen from him. And so you have to keep in mind too, whenever you're looking at projected minutes, you're not projecting it you're not trying to get to, at least in my process, you're not trying to project like the most minutes they can play, in a perfect world scenario. Because like if you're using a Sims tool and you project, for example, Kawhi, let's say that there's some chance he plays 30 minutes. If I put 30 minutes in there, it's going to simulate as if sometimes he plays 34 minutes, as if sometimes he plays 26 minutes. And there's, as far as I know, no world where he's playing 34 tonight. So, you want to keep that in mind when you're looking at minutes projections too. If just in general you see anything over here and it's like, oh, well, I think they're going to play 36, but you only have 34. It's factoring in that, games are going to blow out. Guys get hurt, guys get in foul trouble, all that stuff. So you're just generally going to want your minutes projections to be a little bit lower than the actual max that, the reasonable max for somebody. But all that being said, Kawhi, probably playing around 28 minutes at 7K, fine. Derek Jones Jr., 4,300. Whatever, if he lands in a lineup here or there. I don't think there's anything really super interesting to say about the Clippers. And to John's point, I do love that Zubats should just destroy this front court. Also, if you want to get into revenge narratives, there is that as well. Would like him as a contrarian play, just not one that I'm getting to, at least at the moment. For Indiana, Miles Turner is questionable. Need the most recent injury report. Sorry about that. Get to the 5:30 injury report. Miles Turner is questionable. Aaron Nesmith is questionable. Have them both projected in for right now. Ray J. Dennis, Enrique Freeman, Quentin Jackson, all questionable too. Nobody really gives a shit about that. But don't really know what to make of this one. It is a back-to-back for Indiana. Turner did not play last night. Nesmith did. He played 26 minutes. He closed that game. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, Nesmith had missed a lot of the season. So have them projected in for right now. If Miles Turner ends up missing, Thomas Bryant ends up looking like a very good value again. He's still only $3,200. He played almost 26 minutes last night. He ended up having a decent game, salvaging. He was disappointing for most of the game, but in general, he's a very good point per minute guy. He has, he's going up against a Portland team that is not very good. He's going to be, he would project, if you knew that he's starting, he'd project as the best point per dollar value right now. So this is another reason where it's tough to like just save a center spot for these 10 o'clock games if we don't get news, because you could just kind of end up being screwed. But it is also, if you're like trying to convince yourself, say you're playing like one lineup and you're looking at trying to decide between Gafford in that 7 p.m. game or Zubats in the Clippers game, is, a point in favor of Zubats is that it maintains that center spot and gives you some more flexibility that you can use Thomas Bryant potentially. So that's huge news that we're waiting on with Turner. If he's in, there's nothing that I really love here. Halliburton, getting 5% ownership at 8,500, fine. Use him as a contrarian play. Same goes for Siakam, Turner, Nembhard. Like any of these guys, if they land in a lineup here or there, are fine. But what really matters is if Nesmith's out, you're probably getting a couple more minutes for like Nembhard, and then just kind of like rotational pieces that don't matter a ton. But if Turner is out, then you're getting, all the minutes for Thomas Bryant, maybe a little bit more playing time for Siakam. He still only played 33 minutes last night, but it would make, if Turner's out, Indiana in general just look a little bit better, and then Thomas Bryant look like an absolute priority. Jason said Siakam or Mobley. I think I have like the exact same amount of both. I have a 38-point projection on Siakam. I have a 38-point projection on Mobley. I think they're basically the same thing. So potential tiebreakers, if you're looking at something like that. If you already have pieces from the Boston and Cleveland game, then I would lean towards Evan Mobley because he just correlates with that game. If you don't have pieces at all from that game, then maybe you lean towards Siakam, especially because Siakam also gives you more optionality. So if you view two guys exactly the same, you should pretty much just always be taking the later one, especially in a situation like this where you have legitimate news in this game. So it would really just depend on what the rest of your lineup looks like, which one I would prefer in that lineup. And then finally wrapping things up on the Portland side, nothing injury-wise here. Matisse Thybulle is still out. You're getting 27% ownership coming into DeAndre Ayton right now at $6,500. I get it. Like, he's cheap. I don't totally get why he's getting that much ownership at a loaded center position. So I am getting to some other guys, but I think he's, he projects well. 36.5 fantasy point projection here. He played like 36 minutes in regulation in their last game, but that's not like his average. That's not really how you're projecting it. But he does have plenty of upside here at 6,500. And another plus to having him is that it does, open up that late swap availability as well. Denny Avdia, 6,900, getting 11% ownership. Simon's getting 8% at 6,400. It's pretty much, what we've been getting whenever Portland's healthy this year. You got an 8-man rotation last game, which is nice. 22 minutes from Henderson off the bench, 19 from Sharp. So the starters played a ton in that last game against Phoenix. The problem is that that will happen sometimes, but you're also going to have games where they cut it back and Sharp plays more, Henderson plays more. Like, you can't expect Henderson to just always play 22 minutes. You can't expect Sharp to just always play 19 minutes. Emwald said feel like Ayton could sit on a back-to-back from an overtime game. He's not on the injury report, but to your point, back-to-back overtime game where the starters not only played a lot of minutes in regulation, but 42 minutes apiece for Simons, Ayton, 41 for Grant, 44 for Avdia, 45 for Kamara, to the point that I was just saying where, on average this year, when everybody's in, Simons plays 32, 33 minutes. It would make a lot of sense for Portland in this game to say, okay, we're going to get a little bit more Scoot Henderson on the floor. We're going to get Shannon Sharp on the floor a little bit more. We're going to cut these guys back to their normal, 32, 33 minutes, as opposed to what they did last night. So that is a risk here that you're taking with Portland. And I think it's a little bit different. You're taking that same risk with the Knicks, but I view it differently because Portland's kind of their MO, their status quo when everybody is healthy is to run not a flat rotation. They still play their starters a lot of minutes, but to, like I said, play 32, 33 minutes for guys like Simons. Whereas Tibbs's MO when somebody's out is to just jam 6-7 guys into as many minutes as he can. And generally he doesn't care too much about the back-to-back. So that's why I'm treating them differently, even though we saw that Portland rotation last night. But this last game is really important as far as, one, just likely to be a high-scoring game, and two, Thomas Bryant, the potential to become a great value. Mr. Humble Crypto said, Boucher is out. Do you like Agbaji now? I think Agbaji's still pretty much the same for me. Toronto has a deep bench tonight. So I think mostly with Boucher out, I feel more confident that Olynyk is getting the backup center minutes, although they still could just go to Orlando Robinson. But they have Orlando Robinson. They could play him alongside Olynyk. That would be fine. I had only projected 8 minutes to Davion Mitchell. He can play more now. It's kind of up in the air how the rotation was going to look because Shed had missed a couple of games. So with Quickly back, what's the rotation going to look like with Shed, Mitchell, Jacoby Walter? But the G League guys are available, Jamison Battle's available, Mogbo's available. So there's no shortage of bodies. I still am probably just end up projecting around 28 minutes or so for Agbaji, and he's still going to look like a good point per dollar play. That is, not the best point per minute guy. If Bruce Brown's available, so I don't need to get into that. Bruce Brown maybe plays a little bit more now. Still can never get, too crazy with his minutes, but he is 4,100. I had him at 19.5. Maybe I get him to 20.5 or something now. So it becomes a little bit more interesting, I guess. But that's all I have for you on this one. Thanks for checking out the show. Don't forget to check out the Showdown Sims tool at Run the Sims for the Super Bowl. That is completely free. And if you want to sign up for any of our NFL packages, we have an annual package over there. Sign up for it now. Get 10% off with promo code ENDGAME. Take advantage of the improvements that we make to it heading into next NFL season and lock in that price for life. But one way or the other, you can use the Showdown tool for free. Thanks again for checking out the show. See you back here tomorrow.